Today is November 9th, 2022. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Erle Donaldson in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
Tela, Honduras.
What's the name?
Tela, T-E-L-A.
Okay.
Tela, Honduras.
And when's your birthday?
December 30th, 1926. So I'm 95 right
Yes.
now. I'll be 96 in a month and a half.
Who is your father?
Hosmer Donaldson.
What's the first name?
Hosmer, H-O-S-M-E-R. Hosmer Erle Donaldson.
Okay.
My grandfather...
Now who's your mother?
Wait a minute. Huh?
What's your mother's name?
Dorothy Donaldson. Dorothy Flynn. Dorothy Flynn.
Flynn.
But she was born and raised in Honduras.
Okay.
And I just remember growing up with Spanish kids and going to Spanish school till I was 12.
Why were you in Honduras?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, my dad worked for the United Fruit Company.
Okay.
And he ran into Irish people down there and married my wife, my mother, I mean. And so my grandfather came from Marion, Kansas, and he was a banker, and his bank has just recently been placed on the what do they call them, the buildings of
What, National Register?
on the National Register of buildings.
Mm-hmm.
His bank in Marion, Kansas.
Yeah.
So, but he was not, he robbed his own bank and went down there when they had some bad times, and he went to Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dad went down to see him when he was 18, and they didn't get along together, and so he left and went to work for a banana company, and then he learned the banana business.
Mm-hmm.
So he was superintendent of farms for United Fruit Company, and then he and Zomri, who was the owner of United Fruit Company, the CEO,
Mm-hmm.
got in a big argument, and he had to leave, so he went to Standard. And Standard took us to Nicaragua.
At Standard Fruit Company?
Yeah. No. In Nicaragua, I was about 3 years old, 4 years old at that time. And I only remember playing with Spanish kids and going to Spanish school till I was 12 years old. And then I studied English for about 3 years or 4 years.
So you learned Spanish first?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Spanish was your first language?
Yeah. I didn't. I spoke English, but not too good. We spoke a lot of Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
I had friends with Indians and the San Blas Indians,
Mm-hmm.
and when the Cleveland came out there, Dad got a trip to go out and see the Cleveland.
What was the Cleveland?
Cleveland is the cruiser that the United States put out there with the who were out there with the Marines.
Why was the Cleveland down there?
Well, because of Sandino.
Is that who?
A fellow named Sandino was a rebel, and he was threatening to kill Americans and kidnap them and cut their heads off.
Oh.
So they sent a detachment of Marines down. Hey, Benny, stop it. They sent a detachment of Marines down. I remember visiting him at the airport,
Mm-hmm.
and they had their tents all lined up in a big line. And I guess I'd say probably probably about 2,000 men.
2,000 Marines.
Yeah, it was a good company, a good group. And the Cleveland was sitting out there, and I guess for support, because they couldn't fit on her, and they took me on the boat with Dad, and and they fed me knee-high drinks and took me around, showed me some movies and entertained me. And later on, when I was a scoutmaster here in Bartlesville, I was at camp with the scouts. I heard two adults speaking, and one of them said the Cleveland something or other, and I interrupted and asked, did you say the Cleveland, and were you on the Cleveland in Nicaragua? And he said, yes, I was. And I said, well, I was a little red-headed kid that time, and I had a visit to the Cleveland. And he said, oh, I remember entertaining a doggone little redhead kid.
What year was that?
That was 1932, something like that, yeah. I would be I'd be 8 years old, not 8, I'd be about 7. I was about 7 years old. And they had one little plane with biplane that they put a hook on and pulled up, put on the boat. You know, that was their two-wing spotter plane, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that was the Cleveland.
Yeah.
And, well, Sandino did try to take Puerto Cabezas, and he came in close enough where the Marines went out to meet him, and the ship, they blew the whistles on the ships and everything out there that were there, and took all the people out of Puerto Cabezas, which was not a very big town, because he wasn't a very nice feller. So later on the Marines killed him, but on this scrimmage, not a scrimmage, it was a pretty good battle, because they killed a large number of Marines. And Dad, when we went back on shore, Dad told me not to go to the railroad track. Well, that was like telling me to go there, so I went. And what I saw was the Marines coming in flat cars, dead Marines. And I find that pretty hard.
Yes. What was the place he was trying to take?
Puerto Cabezas.
Cabezas.
Puerto is port of heads.
Yes.
So
How long were you down there?
I was there till I was 18. And, well, not just in Nicaragua. We went back to Honduras. And he was working there again at the United Fruit Company. And that's when I went for 2 to 3 years. Let's see, I was 11, 12, 14. I went to work for myself, and he was away off on a farm, and I was in town. So I was taking a course in electronics, and from DeVray. I started taking it as soon as I got a job and had some money. I took a correspondence course in radio and telephone. Well, it was mostly radio and electricity, the electronics of that day.
Was this in Honduras?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was working, I had my own little apartment, and I studied at night. So then, when I was 16, a fellow came from the interior of Honduras and said that he had a school up there, and he was looking for kids to go. So I went to him and I told him, well, I don't know if my dad has making enough money to pay for me to go, but I'd like to go since I heard you take working students. And I said, I'll quit this job and go with you. And he said, well, he'd be glad to have me, but could he talk to my dad? And my dad, he fixed up so that he could pay the money, pay enough money for me to go as a paying student. That allowed me to study all day, or, to be a student, rather than half time. He had workers that worked till noon, and then studied in the afternoon and night. And we studied what we wanted to study. It was, what he did was give us a test, ask us what we wanted to do when we left the school. I told him, well, I was interested in science, and I was interested in electricity, and I'd been studying electricity. I'd have to quit where I was. And so that's what I did. I studied there at the school, and I studied in the science. I took mineralogy, analytic chemistry, and I had to analyze all the rocks I found. That taught me the chemistry, and we were more on a tutor system. We didn't have classes. We had professors, but these fellows were really educated. One professor I had had a degree from Georgia Tech. Another one had a degree from University of California in Davis. Another one had a degree from Michigan. And anyway, he would send his working students, after they reached a certain point, he would send them up to go to a college up here, and they would come back and teach for him for 3-4 years, and that was the way he paid for it. So we had very good professors. The fellow that Julio Pineda, who was one of the teachers, he was a Spanish man, but he had a degree from somewhere, and I don't know where his was from, but he became the first president of Zamorano, which was the first college that they had in Honduras. And it was supposed to be a Central American college for the Central American school kids. And it was college level, and he was the first president, Julio Pineda. And so we had some very good professors. So I had 2 years there. I hit 18. And when I was 18, I went to the embassy in Tegucigalpa, that's the capital, and and told them that I wanted to make sure that I had my papers in order so that I could come to the United States. I wanted to join the Army. And so they gave me a copy of my birth certificate, which my dad had done in a consulate. They got hold of that, and they gave me a passport so that I was officially leaving Honduras as an American citizen. And there was another paper, I don't know what that was, and so when I went back to the school then and finished in May, and then I went to the coast, and I wanted to get to the States. Well, I didn't have much money. Dad didn't have much money. He didn't make much money at all with United Fruit. And my mother wasn't living with him, so he just couldn't afford it, is the reason. He wasn't a matter of having a problem. And so I spent a couple of weeks with my mother, and then I went and tried to find a job on a boat. And I found a job on the Baalbek, a Norwegian ship. I've got a copy of it. Right here, it shows. I got a copy on the internet, believe it or not. The ship that I came up on. I think it was right here. Yeah, here it is. Let's see. The ball, but I wasn't on it when it wrecked the wharf, but it was later on. This has a whole history of it. See, this is the whole history of all its trips and everything. So that's a very good. I can make a copy of it if you want. But
Sure.
And I was a galley boy in the kitchen. That's the only job I had. So I took it. I took whatever job I could get to get to the States. And I stayed on the ship for, let's see, that would be May, June. I guess that was about July, and then I got off on, it was just before September the 30th.
Of what year?
Of 1945.
Okay.
Let's see, September 3rd. When is Labor Day? Is the 1st of September.
Yes.
Yeah, the 1st of September. I got off on it had gone to Charleston with a load of bananas, Charleston, South Carolina, and I left the ship there. And I went to the Navy Yard to join the Navy or whatever they had. They said they weren't taking any, and they were discharging, and they didn't want anybody unless I knew something about radar. Well, if they had tested me, they'd found out I knew a heck of a lot about electronics, but they didn't. They just said that, and I didn't know what radar was. So the Navy wouldn't take me. I didn't know that I could join the Marines there. I would have done it. But I didn't know they were associated with the Navy. I mean, I was really ignorant, of things in the States. And so I went, there was no Army, or the Army had shut down its recruiting. And somebody told me I could go to Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina. That was 100 miles north. Well, for me to travel 100 miles was not something I wanted to try to attempt, because I was used to traveling in Honduras, and never traveled in a bus, and I didn't have much money, and so I said, well, I couldn't do that. I said, well, I'm gonna just get a job, and I'm registered for the draft and do it that way. So I just stayed registered for the foreign draft and got a job at a paper mill. And about 2 months later, I got a call from Washington telling me that I was drafted in the Foreign Draft Board and that I needed to find myself in Washington.
When were you drafted?
Huh?
When were you drafted?
What was I drafted?
When were you drafted?
This was December 1945.
Okay.
I'd been working then from September on into 45. And so I wound up at Fort Meade, going in at Fort Meade, and they didn't have clothes that fit. And I had clothes my shirts. I had a coverall, that coverall that they used to have for fatigues, and the sleeves came down here to my fine hand, and they were waiting to ship me off someplace, and they put me to work. So they sent me out to be a guide, to take soldiers and people from one building to another, to a group of buildings. I found the building by just walking out there, And what they were doing, they were discharging soldiers coming in from Europe. And they just waited till they accumulated about 25 or 30, and then they took them to some other building. And I was supposed to take them to this other building. I didn't know where it was. I asked somebody, and he didn't know. And so I take these 25 men outside, and I told them, I don't know where to go. So I said, we'll have to just go up there and find it. And they started laughing like mad, because here I am in this outfit that was 2 times bigger than I was, and didn't know where to go. So one of the sergeants says, all right, you guys, shut up. Said, and he lined them up and started a march, and he said, we'll just go down the street and count and find the house. So that's what we did. Found where to go. Then from there on and the rest of the day, I could carry people down there. But every time I went out with them, they'd laugh like mad because the way I looked is, and here they are coming in from Europe, mostly from corporals on up. And so I thought that was, I didn't mind. I laughed with them and told them that's what it was. Anyway, I did that for a week or two. And they sent me to Biloxi to an airport there, and I was in the Air Force. How? I really don't know. I just know that I was 3 years in the Air Force. And somehow I had signed up for the Air Force, and I could not tell you how.
What did you do in the Air Force?
Well, they tested me right away. And I really wanted to go into medicine, but they found that electrical stuff, and they said, well, we need you as an electrician. So they sent me right away to a school. Was an electrical school with telephones and repeater equipment, and mostly communication equipment. Mm-hmm. Well, that was no problem. School was about probably 2 months, mm-hmm. and then they sent me to. While I was there in that 2 months, I took the test to go to Officers Candidate School and passed it. But something funny happened. They told me I had to leave on Tuesday to go to Roswell, New Mexico. And Friday I was scheduled to see the Board of Officers. And the rascals wouldn't hold me over. I said, man, they're not going to do anything in Roswell, sit around in a barracks for a week or two. Said, let me hear what the board has to say. I might be going to OCS. They didn't do it. They made me go. So I went to Roswell. And then they put me on a plane and took me to Kwajalein. That's in the Marshall Islands. Mm-hmm. And that was for the A-bomb test. And what was going on, they were getting ready to do the first A-bomb test. And I was the telephone man. I became the telephone man for the island. For quite a while, I installed telephones and climbed telephone poles and did that sort of stuff. All telephones, then nothing else. Mm-hmm. And then repaired them. And I stayed there about 3 months, 4 months, something like that. Then they sent me back to Roswell.
Were you there for the bomb test?
Yeah, I was there for the first bomb test.
Tell me about that.
Well, I don't know anything about it because I stayed on Kwajalein.
Okay, so you didn't see the bomb test then?
No, I didn't see the bomb or the bomb test. Okay. I know General Eisenhower came out to see the test. Yeah. Not the test, to see the bomb. Mm-hmm. And I know that because I was all over that island. And I did work for the Navy and the Marines, and just anybody had problems. And so I was just sort of a repairman, and then they put me on a ship, and I was 36 days on the coming back on a troop ship, an old troop ship.
How'd you pass the time on the trip?
On the trip, I became the banker. I became the banker for a floating floating card game, poker game. So I was pretty busy. I made a good bit of money, good bit of change, because every time the game was over, I got paid some money.
Where'd the ship land?
San Francisco.
Okay.
And then they just sent me right back to New Mexico, and I was there a couple of weeks, and then they sent me to Carlsbad that's in Fort Worth, Carlsbad Air Force Base. And I was there when the ship at Texas City blew up and did a lot of damage to the town, to the city, and the whole place. And we were.
What caused that? The Texas City.
That was a ship loaded with sodium nitrate. Just shut the door. The ship was loaded with sodium nitrate, which is a fertilizer, and it's explosive. It's part of what that nut who fired off that bomb he had ammonium nitrate in Oklahoma City, and well, this was a whole ship load of sodium nitrate, and it blew up and devastated Texas City. So we got on alert to go down there and just safeguard things, but then never did go.
Yeah.
And at that time, they sent me then to Colorado to go to school. Well, that school was a military finance and administration. Believe it or not, why I don't really know. I just got called in one day and told to go to the airport and go up there. So I got on an airplane, went to Denver and Lowry Field, and 3 months later I came back. I was now a clerk typist, and guess what? They put me to work in electronics. So I'm working in electronics till a major came in one day, and he said, "I hear there's some guy here that's a 405." And I said, "Yes, I am." And he says, "Well, come on in here. I need a secretary." And he carried me off, made me a secretary, and gave me a promotion. So that was great. But the next thing I knew, Dad got sick, and he came up to New Orleans for an operation. So I went there, and this was in the spring. And by the time I got back, I walked into the first sergeant, tell him I was back, and he said, "What are you doing here anyway?" I said, "You don't belong here." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I got orders here that you're supposed to be in Alaska." And so away I went to Alaska. So I never did get to go before a board of officers. I was just pushed around. And I gave up on that. I wound up in aircraft control and warning outfit in Fairbanks. 186, I believe it was. 186 aircraft control and warning. Part of the outfit that was here. And what we did was just put up radar around Alaska. They were putting it all around Alaska and up to Canada. And what they wanted was the electrical part. But when I got there, here was a guy going click, click, click to pull in, to register, bring in 50 men. And I told him to move over and let me have that typewriter. So he moved over, and I went ahead and filled out all the forms and got these guys, everybody in, including myself. And we were just, transferring in. Then we had to do a morning report with all of that in, and I could do all of that. So this was I don't know, a couple of days later, the CO calls me in, and he says, can you do finance report, the payroll? I said, I sure can. And he said, well, how about taking over the job for that payroll? Said, we haven't the men are not getting paid here, and they're trying to do it on a base, and they're making a big mess of things. And some guys here haven't been paid in 3 months, except for $10 a month. So I went to work, and I said, well, I'll need a Jeep because I got to go up there to the base every so often and get this thing straightened out. And so he gave me a Jeep, and he says, you got it. So I did it. And
Where were you based in Alaska?
Fairbanks.
Fairbanks?
Yeah.
Okay, now when were you in Alaska? What time is this?
This was 1946.
1946.
Yeah, and I left there in 48. And yeah, and so I stayed, and I worked in the office, and I was a corporal. Remember the major gave me a and one day they had a party, and a company party, and everybody got drunk. I guess I didn't. I don't drink. But anyway, I was leaving the party about 9 o'clock at night and going over to my barracks when we went into the barracks, and the barracks chief came with me. He saw me going, and he wasn't drunk, and he was along with me. And he was a sergeant, I think staff sergeant or first class. And when we stepped in, there were two big fellers, looked like football players, fighting. And he just turned around and said, nobody's seen me, and went out the door. And I walked between them. And I said, you hit me, and it's 6 months in the brig. Now cut this out. And one was a cook, and I told him, you're a cookie, you get out of this barracks, you don't belong here. And the other fella I took to his room. He was drunk, so put him in bed, took his shoes off, and fixed him up so he could at least be comfortable. And then went back out, and the cook was outside saying bad language, So I went out and got the cook, and I said, do you know any songs? And he had some song he knew, and I said, how about singing it? Let's sing it. He started singing it, and I took him to his barracks. And he was singing this song over and over again.
Was he drunk too?
Yeah, he was drunk too. Well, Monday morning I was a sergeant in charge of the barracks, and the other fellow was gone. I don't know what they did with him. He just disappeared. And they didn't want somebody like that. So.
How long were you in Alaska?
2 years. I was 68. 48 when I left.
Okay.
I was 46 when I went.
Where'd you go from Alaska?
Well, I went to Montana, and I was discharged there.
Okay. When were you discharged?
When?
Yes.
It was, I think it was September of 48.
48.
Yeah, and I went, and I had entrance to the University of Chicago. I had taken a test earlier, about 6 months earlier, to go to college under the GI Bill of Rights, and I passed it. But when I went to Chicago, it was just looked terrible, man. It was slums around it, and it just looked bad. The campus. And I said, man, I don't want to go to this place. It has a good reputation, and you know, it did a lot with the A-bomb tests, and that's how I learned about it. But I decided, no, I wouldn't go there. So I went down to New Orleans, where I had a friend, and I stayed with him a couple of weeks, and then I went to back to Charleston, South Carolina. Well, school has already begun. I couldn't get in then. And so I just decided to get a job, went back to the paper mill, and then a colonel showed up. I stayed in the reserve. I decided I'd probably stay and go to college and then go to the Army. But I was going to go to college first. Oh, they offered to send me to OCS directly when I was at the discharge, being discharged. I remember they said, well, if you sign up right now, we'll just send you straight to OCS. And I said, no, I'm going to college. So I went, but I stayed in the reserve. And then one night a colonel showed up, and he was looking for somebody who was a clerk typist. And I'm loose in the, you know, just in reserve. And so I took the job. And the job was to go to a National Guard outfit in Summerville, South Carolina, and be the what they call the administrative assistant. So I went there and I told him, well, next year I'm going to college. When it starts, I mean, I'll go till about August and I'm quitting. He said, that's all right, we need you bad over there. So I went there and I, well, I just performed like a soldier there. One night a week I was a soldier, and the rest of the time I was a clerk. So it kept me busy. It was a very busy outfit. We had about, it was a heavy weapons outfit, mortars and some pretty good sized guns. And so I went to camp with them at Fort Jackson. They just went into Fort Jackson and spent a couple of weeks with an infantry group. But again, I was just a clerk. I was a clerk and didn't see any. I didn't get out on the field any. So I went back. In the meantime, they'd given me a promotion. I was now first sergeant. Well, I had 5 stripes. I was sergeant first class. And then I went back to the reserve. And then school was starting up, and I didn't have a place to go yet. Here was the Citadel. So I decided, well, heck, I'll just go to the Citadel. I went in there and I went to the Citadel. And graduated with my diploma up there. See the big thing?
Yes.
It's the Citadel.
What'd you get? What was your major?
Chemistry.
Chemistry.
Yeah, just straight chemistry. I was going to study organic chemistry. Then I went to South Carolina, University of South Carolina, and I got 2 years in there and got a master's degree in chemistry.
Yeah. Okay.
And I didn't have any more time and didn't have a scholarship and was married. So we decided we'd go to quiet. So we decided we'd go. I decided I'd go to Houston, where there's a lot of activity in oil and industry and chemistry, and so I went there and got a job right away with a refinery.
Yeah.
Stop. Hey, Penny, cut that out. Be quiet. This is a little dog, but company. Yeah, I stayed in the reserve, and well, where was I now? I was at,
You're in Houston.
yeah, I was in Houston, and I worked for this company, but then I decided I would like to know more about how to operate things in the outside. And as a master in chemistry, I didn't have to work all the time. I had some routines that they couldn't give a chemist to do. It's rather ticklish to do every morning. And about 11 o'clock I'd be finished and have a good part of the afternoon free. So I just left a phone call. A phone number. I'd go out and go to one of the units and ask them to just explain it to me and show me how they operate it. Now I'm talking about a big still 30 feet up in the air.
Is that the refineries?
In the refinery, yeah. And so I really learned all about the refinery, and I could operate it after about a year and a half or so. And then I decided to go to night school and become an engineer, a chemical engineer. So I did that, and I went to night school for about 3 years or 4 years and got a degree in BS, and then they sold the refinery. They wanted to give me a job in California, but I didn't want to go. I said, no, I don't want to raise my kids in LA. You know. The job just didn't seem right. I didn't want to do it. And so I started looking for a job and got a job here at the Bureau of Mines, at the government again. And I enjoyed doing that. And while I was doing that, I went to school at University of Tulsa, night school.
What did you do with the Bureau of Mines?
Oh, I started off just as a field engineer. They had a fellow that just what started me off was to work for AEC, for the Atomic Energy Commission. They had come there and wanted to know if they could inject waste, radioactive waste in the ground, down about 4,000 feet or so. And so I went around the country and looked at waste injection wells that people were using, chemical companies were using, including DuPont. And I told them when I got through, no. That one of the things that I said, I've done a little bit of work for you. They had a place outside outside the building. They had a small building where they did anything with radioactive. You couldn't take nothing radioactive inside the main building of the Bureau of Mines. And so they wouldn't do any work for the AEC. But I asked if they would take some nuclides and tell me how they behaved when they injected them through a rock. And how they behaved was, this was before I made my report, my final report. I found that they would adsorb on the rock. And adsorbing on the rock, they would then accumulate and get hot. So what would happen if they injected these things down in 4,000 feet down and got enough of it done, and they would adsorb around the reservoir and the thing is going to come up. because it would get really hot. And I mean, you'd have a radioactive waste spilling up at the ground. So I told them, no, you can't do that. And don't even do it with really low radioactive material, because the same thing is going to happen. You may take you a year, but you're going to heat it up so hot that it'll pop up at the top and kill some people. And so they backed off on that. And then they put me on the board and wanted me to stay to work for AEC off and on. And I told them no, I didn't. I didn't want to work for them. I didn't want to do any more for them, and I just went to work for the Bureau of Mines then. And they put me with a petroleum engineer, a real good petroleum engineer. I mean, you know, he knew his business. And he immediately took me out to the oil fields and had me talk to people who had oil wells and companies and all around. Made an petroleum engineer out of me right quick. And then he had some research that he wanted done. And we got a laboratory then, and this was 3-phase flow in porous media. So I had a hard time putting that together, but I did it, and when I got through, I had all this data and was ready to write a report. Writing my report on it, Riggs wouldn't put his name on it. He said no, he didn't understand it, and he didn't want to put his name on it, because I had a lot of math in it too. And so I sent it to Washington to be published, and they wouldn't publish it because I wasn't a petroleum engineer, and this thing was so complicated. And so they had me put Gordon, a fellow named Gordon something, can't remember his name now, on there as a co-author who was a petroleum engineer. Well, I said, well, I don't care, I just want it published. So we published it. It has become a classic in the petroleum industry. Up till the time when I was still going to international meetings, I'd go to a meeting, and every so often I'd go into a meeting on petrophysics, and guess what would be up there? The figures that I did. I don't know if I got them in here. I've written several books. And, okay. Let's see, this is a book on petrophysics. I don't know if, see, but this is, a large part of this is research that I did. This book there, and so Tiob and I. Tiob was another professor at the
Petrophysics.
Yeah.
Erle C. Donaldson
Mm-hmm.
and Tiob. Oh, that's neat.
Yeah. Well, I've written several books, and usually I have either well, I work for the Bureau, and I continued doing research. And about 1970, I think, I can't remember exactly when, they sent me to a school. I didn't know what it was about. Turned out to be a management school. I was how to be a CEO or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that, I came back and I had executive furniture in my room. They changed my furniture, and I had them take out some of it because it was too much. But I had an executive desk and stuff, and I was now the assistant director. So from there until
This is still the Bureau of Mines?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was then DOE, Department of Energy.
Okay.
And I was technical. I told them I would not go sit in an office over there across the street. I wanted to have my laboratories, and I wanted to continue my research. I would do it. But and any time the boss wasn't there, all his secretary just called me and tell me, and I'd take care of anything that had to be done. And so I was the research director for that length of time as a technical director, more or less. And they had special place for my car and all of that stuff, but I didn't pay any attention to it. And well, off and on, I did have visitors come in from Washington, and the director wouldn't be there, and I'd go meet him in his office. And
what were your duties with the DOE? What'd you do?
well, I had to learn everything everybody was doing in there, in the plant.
Okay.
Everybody. So what I'd do, just walk into the laboratory and, in the afternoon and say, "What are you doing? Let me see your papers," and sit there and talk with them. And in April of every year, I'd go to Washington and explain the work we were doing from a technical point. Now, they had all the paper reports and all that, but this was different. And from that, they gave us the funding for the year, so it was quite important. And every year I did that.
Now, what research were you doing there?
It's all petroleum research. That's all I can tell you.
Was your laboratory at the Bureau of Mines there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll tell you work that people were doing there. One fellow developed a bit, a new drilling bit, which is the drilling bit that is used in all petroleum today. All right? I developed a centrifuge and a test for petroleum that's used worldwide. The centrifuge is used worldwide. If I had a patent on that, I'd be a millionaire. And I did, this was a test for oil to tell whether it was wetting the rock. We say water wet or oil wet. And if it's oil wet, it behaves in one way, and if it's water wet, it behaves in another. And then I worked on improving the analysis of oil in the ground, and wrote a number of papers on that. A book on that wettability. I think I have it here. Yeah, this one here is wettability. It's the co-authors. I always had a co-author. I had this. He was a. He's the president of a company. He's still the president of that company. And I did work for him here already. Well, but so I ran the research department. I had 9 fellows working for me. And I studied everything that everybody was doing, knew everything. And I was paid attention to safety while I was going around looking, and made some fellows mad at me every now and again. But they had to pay attention. And I remember I walked into a lab, and he had a lab about this size, and he was distilling a big pot of stuff. Big pot like this. But it was completely closed. no vent. The door was closed, the window was closed, and I told him he had to turn it off. And he didn't. He said, "You got to go talk to Eilers," and I said, "I'm talking to you." He said, "You unplug that thing right now." I said, "What you're running right now can blow this whole end of this building up, because if you get about 2% of that in the atmosphere, and somebody comes in here and lights a cigarette, you're gone." Yeah. So.
What was he distilling?
I don't know what he was distilling, but when he unplugged it and everything, I went over to Eilert's, his boss, and I told him. So.
What was his boss's name?
Eilert's, Eilerts. He couldn't do that, and so, I mean, I had the authority to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just like the director. I mean, I was it.
Mm-hmm.
And all through it, I'd go in the machine shop and go around, look at things, because I had to know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew all of it. So that was a big thing every year in April.
When did they close the Bureau of Mines to the DOE?
I believe it was 1982.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 1982 that I went to OU as a professor.
Okay.
I left because when they closed, I didn't want to work for the company.
Yeah.
And about 50% of the technical people left immediately. They all just, because they were all researchers and known throughout the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So they made a big mistake.
Yes.
They thought they could operate it better with the company. After about 5 years, the company folded. I mean, they couldn't publish a paper. I was still on the committee. As a professor, I was still working with the Society of Petroleum Engineers. And every year I would go down and we would review the papers that would be presented at the international meeting. And so I was on this board for, I don't know, as long as I could do it. Mm-hmm. And papers coming in from them, we would rate them 1 to 10. But usually the chairman would just cut it off and say, let's just drop everything below 5. 5 and under, forget about it. And then we'll look at everything rated 4, rated from above 5. Mm-hmm. So all of their papers fell below it. I never saw a paper written by Nipper at all go through the Society of Petroleum Engineers, that bad. Mm-hmm. So they just weren't a research organization, and so
what company was it?
DOE really, it was IIT Research, they call themselves.
IT Research?
Yeah, but they had no association with the institute in Chicago. That's an institute in Chicago, South Chicago. It's IIT is technical. The last word is technical. I can't put I don't know, but IIT is what I remember it as.
What did you teach at OU?
I taught petroleum engineering.
Okay.
I was in petroleum engineering department, but I also taught one course in chemical engineering. Okay. And I stayed for 10 years. 92 I left. Mm-hmm. And my wife was then, she'd acquired a social degree and was working 50 miles away and commuting, and so I decided I'd just retire and write books. Mm-hmm. Well, I was at a meeting in 93 or 94, somewhere in there, and the dean put me to work then. and I went to Bolivia and Thailand and Brazil and other places for the university, you know, in engineering. I don't number of things that they were doing. And I was a big job I had in Thailand, and there they were building they put in a petrochemical department in Chulalongkorn University, which is the big university in Bangkok, and they wanted it to be such that there would be no deficiencies if they sent a student from there to the United States to study, say at OU. The student wouldn't have to take deficiencies because he didn't know this or that or the other, and so that was curriculum. And then they wanted to know how to structure a class that would be a petrochemical department. And I told them they needed a pilot plant. And then they said, well, how do we get a pilot plant built? And so I came back here, went to several universities, and Dow Chemical itself, they let me in to see their pilot plant. And all I said, I'm not gonna take any notes, and I don't care what you're making. I just want to see your equipment, and know where you bought it. And so they did. They let me do that. And as I was leaving, the engineer taking me out to the gate said, "How in the world did you get in here?" I told him. I just turned to him and said, "Influence." But I went to that, and then the big university in Toledo, and I saw, you know, what we needed to do with the pilot plant. Was able to talk to the faculty there and fix them up so that they got what they needed. It took about 3 months to do that. That was a nice job, though. I enjoyed it.
Now, when did you come back to Bartlesville?
Oh, I just came back here last year.
Why'd
February.
you come back here?
I got two daughters that live here, and a son. My son lives 30 miles away, and I have a daughter who lives about 5 minutes away by car, and another one about 10 minutes.
Okay.
And they show up all the time.
Yeah. I'd like to ask, how did World War II affect you when you were down in Nicaragua and Honduras?
I really didn't understand very much of it because all we had was a radio in Spanish, and the president would come. The only time I'd hear that radio would be on Sunday night, and he would come on, and el presidente andino Tiburcio Carías y general, the president, him, doctor, and general so and so would come on and talk. That he didn't say, he didn't know anything much going on.
Yeah. Now, how did the Depression affect you down there in the 30s?
Depression didn't bother us too much because we live off the land.
Yeah. Okay.
We had my family, my mother's family had land, and I even had some land, and it didn't cost much, and we had a big garden.
Yeah.
So I lived with my grandmother for a while, and we got along fine. We didn't have any problem.
Yeah. Where'd you meet your wife?
My wife at the Citadel.
I'm sorry?
At the Citadel.
Oh, at the Citadel. Okay.
She was standing on she had gone there to take a summer course. Didn't want to take it at University of Georgia where she was going. She didn't want to take algebra at the University of Georgia, so she was taking it for the summer at the Citadel, and she was standing there waiting to go inside for registration. I'm walking across the parade ground, and I saw her, and I saw her from a distance, and I told Levitt, who was the fellow walking with me, "See that girl standing there by that column?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I like her looks. I'm going to go up there and get me a date." And he said, "Well, I got to see this." And I said, "Well, hold on." We walked right on up, and I just walked right up to her and said, "I'm Erle Donaldson." She said, "I'm Grace Miller." And it went from there.
Yeah.
Never changed. That was it. We liked each other.
Yes. Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
And 70 years she was my
70 years.
70 years.
70 years. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
Yeah.
I want to thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Okay. And again, this is November 9th, 2022. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Erle Donaldson in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.